Welcome. This week we're going to go over lessons 109 to or through 112. I'm not sure if you've noticed, but these lessons towards the end of this level, we're not focusing so much on the number sense. We're getting into some other things like clocks and tangrands. We're going to be doing fractions in another few more lessons. So if you have a child who has some areas of weakness when it comes to, they're adding to 10 or their number sense, this is when it's a great time to focus on those through the games. So pick some of the games in some of those areas, and then you can include that either as your 5th day, or if the lesson tends to be a shorter lesson, then you can include a game that would focus on an area that you feel you would like to see your child get stronger in. So let's go see what materials are going to be needed for this week. You'll need the cone from the geometric solids and one other solid. It doesn't matter which one you pick. You will also need one of the math balance weights, the geared clock, a dry erase board. You have appendix page 16 and 17, the clocks on the hour cards, and the clock tags with the numbers. Both are going to need to be cut apart. The abacus, math card games book, and appendix page 15, clock A. You also are going to need to use the cards that you cut out. Now I have on here the hour cards, and you could use those also. The worksheet, the geoboard, along with tiles, the reflector, some scissors if you want your children to be the ones to cut out the numbers and the clocks. And then this is optional, just some books on symmetry. This will be in lesson 112, so you would have some time if you need to go to the library to get some. Lesson 109, the o'clocks. Just like in lesson 107 and 108, this is also an enrichment lesson. Try it with your child. If they do well with it, great. If they struggle, it's okay. This is an enrichment lesson. It's a little bit more than what's expected for this age group, but Dr. Cotter believes that they have enough information that they can attempt to do this, and that's why it's in the lesson. You could always save these enrichment lessons for the summer, and then if you feel like this enrichment lesson is too much, you can move on to the next lesson that's not an enrichment lesson, or you could take these days and play some games. Go over some areas, like I said earlier, where your child might have a weakness. You want to see a little bit more fluid, responses to questions. Just keep it enjoyable. Pull out some manipulatives. Maybe just give them a day to explore. In this lesson, you're going to use the geometric solid, the cone, along with one math balance. You're going to just place it on top, and you're just going to use this as a clock to talk about in that first section, reviewing a day. What's morning, what's afternoon, what's evening, and what is night. We'll be using the geared clock. And basically, you're just going to move this around. Remember, you have to move the blue, the minute hand around. They can see the hour changing, but then they're going to also pay attention to what's happening, how the minute hand has to go all the way around for the hour to change. The activity on the second page where it starts on writing and reading the o'clocks. These are the appendix pages that you will need to cut out. You'll be using this one, just the o'clocks, not these. These will be used this week. So if you want to go ahead and cut them out now, that's just save you some time on another day. But today you're only focusing on the o'clocks. It mentions making a clock on a marker board, which you can do if you want. But just like I like to recommend, if you want to put this into a page protector, you don't have to worry about the clock getting erased as their hands are moving across the board. They can write on this. It could get erased. I just find it a lot easier. Again, you have options. So just pick the one that works best for y'all. And then the game in this lesson is the o'clock memory game out of the math card game book. It's C9.1. And you're basically going to be using these two items. And it's just a memory game. You'll have this one, you'll cut them out, lay them face down. You're going to use the o'clocks. You're going to lay those face down, and then they're just going to flip a card over. They're going to flip this one over. Then they have to flip one in the other section over. Do they match? If they match, they keep the cards. If they don't match, they flip the cards back over and try again. Lesson 110, more about the o'clocks. This is going to be the last clock lesson for this week. Again, it's an enrichment lesson. In the first section about hours in the day, it has a little note about midnight being the middle of the night. It doesn't really say anything about noon. So I think this would be a good place to point out how 12 o'clock noon is the middle of the day and 12 o'clock midnight is the middle of the night. They have a game in here called the o'clock handshaking game. It's found in the math card game book C9.2. This is very similar to the handshaking game that you may have played at the beginning of the year. Again, this will call for like stuffed animals. And then as you read through it, you'll see where they're going to go and they're going to shake the little stuffed animal's hand depending on what answer they're looking for. If you don't have stuffed animals, because we didn't really keep stuffed animals. I have 6 children. That was like way too much stuff to have to keep up with. Just find something. Maybe you can pick out some of their favorite toys and lay them in an area and then put the card by it. And rather than shake hands, maybe they just go up and they tap the table. I don't know. Adapt. Do what you need to do to get this to work and what you know your child will enjoy doing. The activity on the second page is similar like the previous lesson, where it's having you draw a clock face on the drawing board, or you can use this in its place. And you're teaching your child how to draw the hour hands on the clock. Now, not all children are going to have that fine mobile dexterity to do the arrows. When you're working with your child, you know, say they're going to do this and then they're going to make an arrow. And then they're going to do something like this. And then when it's 4 o'clock. Of course, I made my hour hands really big. If your child struggles with this and they can't make the arrow, they could just maybe put a line for right now. But see how they do. Their lines don't have to be perfectly straight. Just in the general vicinity. Or you could always give them a straight edge to use. Something that will help them make their line straight. But remember, if you do that, make sure it's something you don't care if you get marker on. Lesson 111, reviewing halving and doubling. This is where you need the additional geometric solid. If you want to use those, you can use whatever you want. You're just going to place these items, 2 items out a specific distance, and then you're asking your child to let you know when you've made it halfway. So on the top of the second page, we're going to be using the geoboard, and your child's going to make a shape, a rectangle, a specific size. It says 2 units by 4 units. So what it means is one of these from one peg to the next peg is 1 unit. So let's say I'll do this way. I'm going to go over 2. Then I have to go down 4. All right, so you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 2 units. Then they're going to take a second rubber band and they're going to divide it in half. There's a few ways that they could do this. So they could put a rubber band this way to divide it in half. You could do it like that. And then you can see the third option in the lesson book. Then once they understand that, it asks for you to have them make other rectangles so they can make their own size rectangles. And hopefully they're going to see and discover how some rectangles, depending on what units they're using, are going to be able to be divided a lot easier than some other rectangles. In the conclusion, you're going to use tiles, and you're going to take out some tiles, say 2 tiles, and you're going to ask your child to double it, and then you're going to ask them to have it. And then notice it says to do that with some other numbers, but make sure they're even numbers. Right now, it's just easier for children to double and to have when we're using even numbers. Last lesson for this week, lesson 112, symmetry. This is a lesson that you'll need if you have it. This is optional, some books on symmetry. There are some suggestions over on the side. So maybe you could check your library, see if they have it. Who knows, you may have some at home for yourself, or you could find something online. I don't know. Maybe you don't want to do it at all. That's okay too. You'll be using the tiles and the geometry reflector for this lesson. And with the tiles, look at the first page under seeing symmetry. It's really hard to tell that that first figure has other colors in it. They're so dark. So my guess is that the dark ones would be like the blue, and the lighter of the darker would be like a green tile, if you put those down. And then to the right, I would think that's 2 yellow tiles in the middle and then 1 red tile on each side. In the explanation, we're talking about symmetry. So that row looks symmetrical, but it's not the row itself that we're focusing on. It's the design within the row. Is the design symmetrical? Close to the bottom, where they have the 4 tiles in a row, they make it really hard to tell that there's different ones there, again, because they're so dark. So use the blue and greens on this one. You could put the 2 green in the middle with the 2 blue on each side, and then the other is all blue. On the top of the second page, there is a match the symmetry game. Look to the side in the explanations. It says that a child can use the geometry reflector to check for symmetry. They don't have to, but they can. I know that sometimes the geometry reflector can be a little bit challenging to use. All right, let's see if I could do this. When you're using the geometry reflector and you do something like this, where you have, a blue, this is real basic. Let's see if I could do this without them sliding. All you're going to do with the geometry reflector is you're going to lay it on the top, and then your child's going to look down from the top. So it's like a dividing line. And does it look the same on the one side as it does on the other side? What makes this nice is the thinness of this. So it's easier to see when looking down. So they're not really looking through. You're not going to look through it. You're going to look down at it. Go ahead and look at that last design on that page. Now your designs are going to look a little different because your children are going to have a different way of doing things. But what are some ways that you could put the geometry reflector on that so that both sides are equal? So that's where some of that challenge comes in with your children. They may know right away how to do it. They may have to play around and see. Give them some time. Let them try to discover it on their own first. And then the game, fix the symmetry game. Once you've made kind of a complex symmetrical design, then you could play a game with it. You have your child turn their back, and then you're going to take a piece. You could either change it out for another color, you can turn it to another direction, whatever you want to do. So when your child turns back around and looks, they have to figure out what is it that's not making it symmetrical, and then they fix it. Again, this is where it talks about reading about symmetry. That is totally up to you. Who knows? You may want to look on YouTube and see if there's any short little videos on symmetry. That might be more interesting to your child. I don't know. We have lots of choices on how to go about this, or not do anything at all. It's up to you. All right, we are done. Can you believe how we're getting so much closer to being done with this level altogether? And I love how towards the end of the levels, I don't know, I think it lightens up just a little bit. We're going to tackle some things, but it's not something that they just have to know. It's nice to be introduced to, but as you see, they're enrichment lessons. The halving and the doubling, the symmetry. So you can see it's requiring a different way of using our brain for this because they're not having to figure out strategies and adding and stuff like that. So remember, use that fifth day, pull in some games in those areas where you would like your child to get stronger in. Enjoy your week, and I'll see you next week as we go over lessons 113 through 116. Until then.